Alright guys, after a long bit of procrastination, I want to dabble into something I mostly consider unknown territory, scaling. As in how good a trainer is, not if their team could blow up a planet or something. Today, we will be ranking Ash's rivals weakest to strongest. I'm never one to stall, so let's get into how this works. There will be 4 main levels to keep note of: Gym Leader level, League level, Elite 4 level, and Champion level. Next is that I ought to show the list of rivals. As you can see, many might be questionable choices, but those many also have traits to earn that label, regardless if their worthiness is less than others. However, 2 rivals were exempt from important reasons. One is Tobias and the other is Virgil. We know how well they fare against their peers, but their limit is basically unknown. One last important thing for this list is that there will be a lot of piggybacking. I don't want to repeat the same feats over and over again, so context for each prior rival will be key for full understanding. But without stalling any longer, let's get started. So, starting off with the weakest rival, we have none other than B. The main reason is that Ash's ultra class opponents sorta get tougher and tougher. She technically outscales a final gym leader like Volkner because she had a close match with a stronger Ash, but that also means she'd be under trainers like Marnie and Drasna, who are League and Elite 4 levels respectively. This makes B some sort of border between Gym Leader and League level, but unfortunately that would happen to be lower than every other rival listed. But to move on to the next rival, let's talk about Richie, the OG League rival. What put him and many others above B is that he's clearly League level, and that's more safe and reliable than B's more complicated case. But what makes Richie even lower is that the Indigo League has a much less impressive roster of trainers. I don't want to go too deep because I want to save the Indigo League scaling for a different time, but in short, it's visually implied the second strongest trainer in that league was the one that barely beat Richie. And quick reminder that Richie only barely defeated Ash's exhausted team, a team that isn't anything to sneeze at compared to later series. Speaking of later series, the next rival to go over is Nando. Simply put, I believe the Sinnoh League trainers are stronger than the Indigo League ones. Trainers like Nando put up a decent fight against a well-experienced Ash, while most of the Indigo League was comparable to a very lucky rookie. The downside though is that he was early pickings for the league. He definitely would have stood a chance against the one-off no-named characters, but his matches definitely met against the more relevant ones. The next one will basically be a copy-paste of what I just said, and that is Trevor. Like the Sinnoh League, the Kalos League is on a different level from the Indigo League. However, just like Nando, Trevor was early pickings, and it's no surprising how he was against a line, but his loss is just too damaging to give a reason to be put truly higher. Following Trevor is Bianca, and the reason she's low compared to her Unovan peers is that she's pretty much the jobber of the bunch. At the bare minimum, she is league level, so she's on an even playing field with the previously listed rivals. However, what puts her above those previous rivals is that Bianca at least has wins against some of her peers, even if they were rare. That's simply more impressive than say Trevor and Nando, who struggle to do the same. Leading it up now will be Conway, and he was initially higher. His main skill is just prep time, and that's not really useful for this ranking. I'll admit that he does still give a good fight without it, so that's not really too terrible. Unfortunately, the most damaging nail in the coffin is that he pretty much loses to a mediocre roster of Ash. But to be nice, he's above Bianca for the fact that his trickier battle style is a tiebreaker for the relative levels of strength. But moving on, we will be discussing Stefan actually. What has him above Bianca was simply the fact that he beats her time and time again. What has him above Conway is that he required to have Ash's ace to get the job done. To cut this short, the main reason he's this low requires me to talk about the next upcoming rival. Next up is the final member of the D tier, and that's Trip. The primary reason he's on top of Stefan is how Trip is usually looked at to be Ash's most formidable opponent in Unova. Although a clearer answer would just be that Trip lost to a stronger Pokemon compared to Stefan. Pikachu and Crocodile's rivalry ended with the mouse coming on top, so that's my supporting claim regarding that. However, Trip is lacking compared to upcoming rivals, peaking him at the top of D tier. But as of now, we are in the C tier, which isn't that much higher than those in D tier, but have a little bit more capability. To start off, we'll actually list 3 rivals. Listing it from weakest to strongest, we have Cameron, Tyson, then Harrison. They're somewhat interchangeable, but I'm gonna list why they're ranked where they are. Firstly, the main thing that they share in common is that they all beat Ash, something majority of the D tier characters fail to do in their conferences. However, since that's their best achievement, they are stuck at the bottom of the C tier. And to start with Cameron, despite the fact that he beat Ash with 5 Pokemon, I feel there's an argument to be made that he was beatable. In short, Ash just had to rearrange a better team, but Ash was beaten nonetheless, so it's still a better accomplishment than those in D tier. Sadly, the questionability of if Ash could beat Cameron puts him lower than the other 2 that beat him outright. Next is Tyson and Harrison together, and this is harder as his and Harrison's battle had the same result but played very differently. The score settler came down to how well their team did against Ash, for which Harrison's team came out as the more capable one. All in all, like said earlier, both of them at least beat Ash clean and fair, so don't forget about that. There's not much else left to say, so let's just move on with the next rival. This might come as quite confusing, but coming on in is Morrison. Now, the reason's just like Cameron, but reverse. Like with the argument that Ash could have won, there's the argument that Morrison could have won. How would this be different from Tyson and Harrison, you ask? See, in their battle, Ash got 2 freebies from Morrison because he wouldn't fight. It was until he had 4 Pokemon left that he truly started to battle, so the fact that Morrison almost beat Ash's full team with just 4 says quite a lot. Although that sort of wraps up the average league level rivals. From here on out, the rivals mentioned all have to do something good to make them stand out. Grooving on next is Tierno. On paper, he's league level, but his main highlight is his match against Sawyer. Spoilers for Sawyer, but I have him near Elite 4 level. Based on how well he performed against Ash, who barely lost against someone on that level, I wouldn't say it's that much of a stretch. With Tierno, he manages to do good for the most part, which is a cut above literally everyone else before him. However, what puts him this low is that once Skeptile was in the mix, the gap practically widened. That difference in power sets him back to being that much higher. Busting out all over next is Barry. Now, this case is quite literally the same with Tierno, but replaced Sawyer with Paul. Even though he got swept, Barry did surprisingly well. He gave Paul some work until Electivire came in, and as for how Barry's above Tierno, it really just came down to who you thought was stronger between Sawyer and Paul. As you can see, my vote went towards the latter. The next one is above Barry for similar reasons. Following him up at the end of C tier is Hao. His case is like Barry and Tierno, except the opponent he faced was much stronger. Based on his status in the strength of Kukui in the initial games, I don't think it's crazy to label Ash as a champion level trainer by the end of Sun and Moon. How giving this Ash a hard time definitely sold me on putting him this high. This reason for stopping him here is that Ash wasn't as strong as when they battled then, and Rowlet was on the weaker side of Ash's team, giving Hao a lighter sentence. Now we are in the B tier. To be honest, nearly every character here will have similar arguments with the last 3 rivals, but here we are to finally dive into what I can consider the Elite 4 level rivals. Starting first, we got Gary Oak. His most solid feat comes from the fact that in the last episode of Advanced Generation, he defeats Ash. For context, defeating Elite 4 level trainers was what Ash was trying to achieve during the final saga. Gary does admit though that his own win was due to Ash not knowing about a new Pokemon instead of simply just being stronger, so that's why he's on a lower spectrum. There's also the fact that he rivals Go, who can keep up with such a high level Ash, so I doubt someone weak would be this high at least. Next up is Sawyer, and like said earlier, Sawyer is close to Elite 4 level by just barely losing to Ash, who just barely lost to Elan, who was already above this level by just a smidge. I think there's a bit more weight to this compared to Gary's extremely situational win. There's not much else to say other than the fact that the next rivals do something a teensy bit better. Coming right up is a 3-in-1 special starting with Guzma, Kiawe, then Gladion. It'll be a hassle to do them separately, so let's just get them all together. Just like with Hao, these three managed to just narrowly lose to the champion of Alola. It's from the semifinals to the end of the series that I believe Ash finally dipped his toe into the champion spectrum. In terms of the order, Kiawe and Gladion are above Guzma for the fact that we know they got stronger since Sun and Moon. As for Kiawe vs Gladion, we sorta already got the result already. Sure, Kiawe got his revenge in Journeys, but that was with Gladion's less experienced member. Plus, Gladion was usually the one above Ash, while Kiawe was usually just a teensy bit under. But that wraps up the B tier. As you can see, each tier is getting shorter to finish. Not only are the remaining rivals decreasing, but so is the need for discussion. At this point in the list, we are now in the A tier, aka the champion level tier. Starting off, we have Raihan, and it's clear as day. Not only did the games hint that he could be a champion if he just went somewhere else, the anime backs it up by having him keep up with Leon somewhat. The reason he's at the lowest here is that he was pretty much on the bottom of the Masters 8 the whole time, and that's kind of telling me that this level of strength was just reached only barely. Next up is Kukui, and there's not much to say. He's pretty much the source behind my statements regarding Sun and Moon Ash being champion level. He's basically an equivalent of one in the games, and while it's not confirmed or anything, it would be very disingenuous if he wasn't like that in anime too. Plus, it'd be a logical placement from between X and Y and Journeys. Not to mention, he could fight a Masters 8 Ash anyway, so that helps too. Coming in at the bronze medal, we have Paul. This may come as a stretch to some, but his most recent battle with Ash explains a lot. The Pokemon he used were relative to Ash's Master 8 team, and crazy enough, this was just an imitation training team. That's why he's not dropped down lower, because not only would Paul's greatest strength not be cheap imitations, but his real best Pokemon wasn't even used. For that, I'd say he's comfortably the third strongest rival. Finishing up the A tier, we have the silver medalist Alan. Before Journeys, he was the source behind the Elite Four level statement due to his victory over Malva, and now he grew to reach the realm of champions. Until Charizard, Alan could at least perform decently against Leon of all people. While I feel there's an argument Paul could be stronger, Alan clearly and definitely has a more solid foundation. Lastly is the S tier, and this shouldn't come as a surprise, but it's going to Leon. If I gave this tier a name, it'd be the Monarch tier. As the original and main example, this level of strength is earned by being the very best like no one ever was. Not only that, but based on his battles, Leon is just on a different level entirely, making him the sole rival at this spot. So, congratulations Leon for being the strongest rival of Ash Ketchum. Overall, I'm proud of this ranking. Some of them could have been moved around, and there was a lot of mental gymnastics to get past, especially with the C and D tier, but I'm overstating you guys at the very end, so yeah, that's pretty much all I got for now. Yep.
Do it now!